we were due to have Barry Mann from Parramatta City Council this afternoon. He was unable to make it, we found out earlier this week. And rather than draft someone in at the last minute, what I've done is essentially broaden the focus and talk to some of the school partners, talk to Mirvac and Dulux and Stockland and Laing O'Rourke, and find out also what they're doing. And so I'm just going to give you a couple of quick snapshots. The Greater Western Sydney area does cover 14 different local government areas, so it's a huge area. It also represents 9% of the Australian population, 44% of Sydney's population. It's the fastest growing region in New South Wales. And the Greater Western Sydney area generates $95 billion of revenue every year, third only behind Sydney and Melbourne CBDs. Western Sydney, currently there's just over 2.2 million people, but that's rising rapidly to 3 million people. And if we're to look at the construction monitors for Greater Western Sydney area, there are 17 major construction and infrastructure projects at the moment, so 17 major projects. If we're to look from a Green Star focus, and this is from the GBCA's own website this morning, we can see, hopefully you can still see at the back, there's a slew of projects along the coast there, along the eastern suburbs, but then in the middle of the screen there's just as many Green Star registered and certified projects in that Western Sydney area. Within the M7 circle, as it were. And again, if we're to look at the infrastructure sustainability projects, there are 28 projects around New South Wales, 7 certified, 21 registered, $80 billion worth of projects around Australia at the moment, and a lot of those, again, within that Greater Western Sydney area. So I asked some of the school partners, as I said, Mirvac, Stockland, Laing O'Rourke, I asked them a couple of questions. How are procurement decisions being made on projects at the moment around New South Wales and in Western Sydney in particular, and how is this changing? How is this relevant to the small and medium-sized businesses that we're speaking to? Hopefully you can read that at the back. Mirvac said, well, look, procurement decisions are obviously going to be influenced by rating tools like Green Star, and they look at lighthouse projects like those around Barangaroo, those around 200 George Street, where EY and Mirvac are based themselves. But what they went on to say was that life cycle assessment, and Jonas will be talking about that this afternoon, is informing more product and material selection. Sustainability is going to be a key component. It's not just going to be a nice to have, it's going to be a key component on selecting suppliers. And essentially Mirvac is trying to tell people to skill up now, get ahead of the game, because suppliers are going to need to at least understand the basic concepts to be in with a chance at winning tenders. They're going to need to have those conversations with their customers now. Stockland has echoed that, not surprisingly. Their Marylands and Wetherill Park projects, they were committed to 4- and 5-star Green Star ratings very early on, with a focus on building sustainable and resilient assets. So when Stockland, and in turn their contractors, were procuring, they were looking at a number of minimum sustainability requirements, focused on things like minimum waste recycling, around use of low VOC products, around certified timber, environmental management plans, ISO 14001. All of those meant that they needed suppliers, they needed businesses who understood the language, but who could deliver on those sustainability requirements. So looking at small and medium-sized businesses that could, and how they documented that, gave them a competitive advantage. And Stockland have said they cannot continue to raise the bar, so look at these world-leading projects, without collaborating with their supply chains. So they need their supply chains to have the capabilities to execute those requirements. They needed to be able to keep educating themselves and look to provide more and more sustainable solutions. So again, Stockland was saying that's where the school and things like the Responsible Construction Leadership Group, Sustainability Advantage programs were becoming more and more useful. This was the relevance. Laing O'Rourke said a couple of really interesting things to me. Big contractors are trying to increase the awareness of both sustainability per se, but also the wider benefits that sustainability brings, the commercial, the social, the environmental benefits there. And decisions are being made, as we just heard from Manuka, but decisions are being made around quantitative, the dollars, the money, the figures, but also qualitative methods. And those multi-criteria analysis tools, we'll be hearing a bit more about those later, means that the economic drivers, the bottom line, is no longer the only factor to be considered. And we just heard that 30% of the procurement focus is now on non-commercial items for John Holland Group. So it's how the supply chain can demonstrate certain aspects, not just achieve, but actually prove those, is becoming more important. And in 5 years' time, if we're to look ahead for Laing O'Rourke, economic drivers are going to carry far less economic weighting than they do now. The bottom line will still be important, of course it will, but the economic drivers will carry far less weight. And there'll be a lot more education options available. Yes, of course, the school, yes, Sustainability Advantage and all of the programs, but there will be a lot more available online for people to access. And Dulux, again, as a manufacturer, as a producer and manufacturer across Australia, said a couple of really interesting things which were really quite personal. Nowadays, there's not a lot separating the rest of the bids from the successful ones, but it's the companies that can make that extra effort, that can demonstrate that around sustainability, whether that's around procuring materials or submitting proposals. It's the companies that can demonstrate that extra effort, and can demonstrate that it's not just greenwash. It's not just a nod to, oh yes, and we have green leaves on our website, but actually demonstrate what that means in reality. Many businesses are still coming to grips with what sustainable procurement means for their work, but there's a growing number of both owners, investors and customers who really value that. So more and more what they're saying to, in turn, their suppliers is that unless you make a start on this now, you're going to be left behind. This sounds like I'm trying to make a business case for the school, but what I'm saying is that these are the leaders around the industry saying now is the time to start. There's all these resources available. Get on board, and it is going to be quite a journey. It is going to be complex, but again, little and often, as I was saying, is going to be relevant.